that for the speakers? Yeah, just one speaker. Oh, cheers.
Jagatnanda. It's like
Where would you put this? We'll sing the song. Okay. You're missing an action. So do we start right away? Okay. No, that's all right. I also told Nityananda Khan I need a whiteboard or a book card. He was going to arrange that. Oh, I think that might be it there. There's a marker. Thank you. Oh, it's cold. Hare Krishna. So we're going to sing this song. If it's the right one. It's Yashamati Nanda. Is there a kartal player in the house? Or a couple of kartal players? I think it's got to come really close to here so that it's going to be on the video. It's right next to it. Yashamati Nandana Prajabaranagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Yashamati Nandana Prajabaranagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Gopi Paranadana Madana Manohara Kaliya Damona Vidhana Amalaharinam Amiya Vilasa Amalaharinam Amiya Vilasa Vipina Purandara Navinanagara Baro Hamsivadhana Suvasa Brajajana Palana Sura Kulana Sana Sundarananda Gopala Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Gopala Jamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasanahara Rasa Rasika Kripa Moya Jamuna Tatachara Gopi Vasanahara Rasa Rasika Kripa Moya Shri Radha Vallabha Brindavana Natabaro Shri Radha Vallabha Brindavana Natabaro Bhakati Vinodasraya Bhakti Vinodasraya Yashamati Nandana Braja Varanagara Gokula Ranjana Kana Amala Harinama Miyavilasa Govinda Madhava Navanita Taskara Shri Radha Vallabha Brindavana Natabaro Shri Radha Vallabha Brindavana Natabaro Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo. Thank you. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajaka Sutra Sutra Sri Simad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bharijam. So don't let these 4 pages of notes scare you. We will end the class by midnight. Don't worry. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So I was asked to speak on a particular topic. I don't know if you all know that. If you were expecting a Bhagavad Gita class, this is going to be, as they say in India, change kuro. We're going to change this a little bit. I was asked to speak on that in our society, as in most organizations and certainly in spiritual organizations or faith-based organizations, you'll find what we might call, for lack of better term, conservative viewpoints and liberal viewpoints, and a lot in between. So I was asked to speak on that topic, and I guess I was asked to speak on this topic perhaps because I wrote a paper about it, but perhaps more so because of my background. My name, by the way, my name is Vraja Vihari Das, and I guess I was in Chicago in first time 1978 at the temple in where was it? Next to Northwestern University, right? Evanston, right? Yes, yeah. I'm originally from New York, and I went to school in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and kind of stayed in Detroit for 10 years, and then moved to India, and I got married and moved with my wife to Vrindavan, and we lived there for 21 years. And during that time, I took up a profession that I'm now pursuing, which is in the field of conflict resolution, hence kind of this topic. And at that time, I was working with the Supreme Court in India, I was training judges and lawyers, introducing them to conflict resolution. And then, and also teaching some Shastra courses in Vrindavan. And then about 3.5 years ago, our family moved back to America, and my wife is the president of the temple in Washington, D.C. And I'm the husband of the temple president. That's my main thing. And now I work in the same kind of work, but now I work for the federal government of the United States. So here's my first quote. So you got your seatbelts on, you ready? By the way, this can be extremely interactive. So if you have any thoughts, any questions, any comments throughout, just raise your hand and we'll entertain those. It's not like a regular Gita class, which usually means someone gives a talk and leaves some time for questions at the end. Okay? So here's my first, one of my favorite quotes. We do not see. And by the way, if I'm like this, because I printed this in like 3-point type, I'm getting old, so you see me kind of squinting. We do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. Even like if you talk to a policeman and they come to the scene of a car accident and there's 3 witnesses, often they'll get 3 different reports of exactly what happened. So I thought that was a good quote to begin with. Now, when we're discussing this topic, by the way, we're talking about it within the confines of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So we're not talking about liberal viewpoints or conservative viewpoints that are not, as we would say in ISKCON, bona fide. That's one of our favorite words, right? But rather we're talking that within the scope of what is Krishna conscious, there are these varieties. Okay, so I think that's a really important statement. And here's something right from the very beginning of the 6th chapter. How many of you have read the Nectar of Devotion? Okay. So then you must remember the 6th chapter. Could somebody repeat it verbatim? No? Okay. Luckily I have it here. But this is a point that Srila Prabhupada makes right in the beginning of that chapter. He says, the purport of this statement is that Srila Rupa Goswami proposes to mention only basic principles, not details. For example, a basic principle is that one has to accept a spiritual master. Exactly how one follows the instructions of his spiritual master is considered a detail. For example, if one is following the instructions of his spiritual master, and that is different from the instructions of another spiritual master, that is called detailed information. But the basic principle of acceptance of a spiritual master is good everywhere, although the details may differ. So what we're talking here, when we're talking conservative and liberal, we're talking about details. If we were talking about principles, that would be out, and a principle that was different than our standard Krishna conscious principles, that would be outside of the boundaries that I was talking about. So we're only talking about things that are within the boundaries that anyone would have to accept basic principles. And then we're talking more about the application of those principles and the details, which are not insignificant. Okay? Is that clear? Any questions on that? Yes. What if there's confusion about the principles? How do we, now you ask the $64,000 question. Boy, that was the first question, the toughest question. So one time, His Grace Burijan Prabhu asked that very question to Srila Prabhupada, because he was looking at this quote from Nectar of Devotion, and he asked Srila Prabhupada, how can you tell the difference between a principle and a detail? And Prabhupada's answer was, that takes some intelligence. Because it is a super important question. Because if we change a principle, we're in big trouble, right? But if we don't sometimes at least consider changing a detail, then what can happen, amongst other things, is we can become irrelevant to the world. Right? Because detail often means adjusting according to desha, kala, patra, time, place, and circumstance. And a great acharya like Srila Prabhupada made a number of adjustments, and we sometimes also make adjustments. The preaching in Kuala Lumpur is different than Berkeley, for example, right? And so, but I don't think, there's certain principles which we would have no question about, like what mantra should we chant? Should we chant Nitai Gaur Radhe Sham, Vraja Vihari Krishna Hari Ram, or should we chant the Hare Krishna Maha mantra? Should we follow the 4 regular principles? Should we, worship the deity? Should we visit a holy place? Should we not offend devotees? So there's some basic principles. But that's a great question. I hope I answered it as well as I could. Good question. So I was asked to talk about conservative and liberal. So let's first get this out of the way, that Srila Prabhupada would use the terms differently. Okay, and I'll give you some examples. Here's an example when he was talking to a reporter from the New York Times. And he said, when people hear this, they go away saying, oh, Swamiji is very conservative. But I cannot become liberal and tell everybody, go ahead and do all nonsense, and you can become God conscious. I cannot possibly recommend that. Therefore, my first condition is that if someone wants to become my student, he has to follow these 4 principles. So there he was using conservative in a positive way, right? He was saying that I am conservative. If I was liberal, yato mat tato pat, you can do whatever you want, okay? But then he would say, a devotee said, but in these Arabic countries like Egypt, they're really conservative. They're very strict. Prabhupada, yes, conservative means fanatical. So there he's using it in a negative way, okay? So just when you think positive, negative, here's another one. Prabhupada, he quotes the 18th chapter, text 55. He quotes, Bhaktyamam abhijananti. By devotional service, neither by jnana, yoga, karma, no, that will not touch. You cannot become mad after Krishna by any means except by this devotional service. Therefore, we are so much conservative. Because we are actually after Krishna, then we must accept the real method. Okay, so we have to be conservative. And then, and here, Allen Ginsberg told me, Swamiji, you are very conservative. I said, I am the most lenient. I am not conservative. You are conservative. You cannot give up your bad habits. I am very liberal and accepting everyone. But you, because you are conservative, you cannot give up your bad habits. Therefore, you deny to come to my camp. I am very liberal. Maitreya Rishi Prabhu says, a Vaishnava is conservative with Krishna and liberal with everyone else. Prabhupada, that is not conservative. Conservative means unnecessarily catching something. That is, you want to keep your life? That is conservative, do you think? Maitreya Rishi, no. And if the murderer thinks that you are very conservative, I want to kill you, and you do not allow, that is not conservative, that is self-preservation. That is not conservative. Conservative means unnecessarily you catch some rules and regulations without any meaning or without any utility. That is conservative. In Sanskrit, it is called niyamagraha. So, just to complicate matters a little bit, Srila Prabhupada used the words sometimes positively, sometimes negatively, right? The same words. Okay, so you can't necessarily pigeonhole Srila Prabhupada like that because he used the words differently. Okay, so now we're going to go through a little exercise. That doesn't mean you're going to do sit-ups or something like that. But now, bring this along here, out in television land. This is an exercise called polarity management. It's a fancy word, but it's a simple concept, okay? So let's say we put conservative here, liberal here, and we make a nice box. Oops. So this is the positive parts of conservative, the negative parts of conservative, the positive parts of liberal. Looks like I gave more space for the negative. But anyway, that's just my not being a good artist. So I just put you in charge of ISKCON. What are some good things about being conservative in any organization, but let's say within ours? Yes. Protects from deviation. Good. Did I spell that right? Does this have a spell check? No. Okay. What else? Yes, Prabhu. Discipline. What else? Maintaining purity. Okay. And I'm sure if we had more time, we could come up with a number more. Now, what are some of the downsides of conservatism? Unrelatable. Or at least possibly, right? Fanaticism. Social relations could be hard. Okay, so, okay. I'll just put clash with society. Is that okay? Cultural. Okay, did you have one more? Oh, Mataji, yes. Okay. Not respond to change. Okay. And we could go on more with this, but for the sake of time, this is just Okay, now what are some positive things about being liberal? Yes, Mataji? Inclusive. Adaptable. Adaptable to getting new markers. No, this works. No, it works, it's fine. It's okay. Yes? People feel encouraged. And what are some negative things about being liberal? You guys really like being liberal? No. Yes? No boundaries. Yes, bro. Could lose track of the goal. One more? Yes? Oh, Matt, we haven't heard from it. Events. Okay, so you get the idea. Again, we could continue this exercise, and if we were, probably within an hour, we could really get a really good list, quite a thorough list, even a half hour. But this was just a little taste. By the way, in a polarity exercise, you see what happens, and this is not only in ISKCON, this is pretty much every organization in the world. It begins here, right? We begin with, our tradition, right? And then we experience all the great things that tradition brings. And then after some time, you start experiencing some of this stuff. And someone gets a bright idea, you know what? I think we should go over here. There's so many good things about being liberal. But then after some time, what happens? And so what you see happen again and again in organizations is, for those of you who are mathematicians or IT swallows, you get this kind of infinity loop. Okay? And over a course of a number of years, you see this, sometimes they say about 40 years, it takes for an organization to go full circle, right? And you get that. Now, the idea behind this exercise is to take a step back, look at this, and acknowledge that cycle of effects, but try to do something like this. And really see if you can emphasize only a little bit of the negatives and really emphasize the positives on both sides. And then, if we were doing this exercise as part of, let's say, for this temple or for ISKCON, then we would come up with action plans to emphasize the positives of both sides and to avoid the negatives. And that has, just in case you're interested, that is a fancy name called polarity management. But it gives you an idea of what we're talking about. Okay. So we've discussed how Srila Prabhupada used these terms, right? Both in both positive and negative ways, and we talked about some of the pluses and minuses of each side. So then the next question might be, why do people? Again, we're talking about within the confines of bona fideness. We're not talking about liberal views that are within the confines of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, conservative views that are within the confines of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So why do people have different opinions? Yes, Prabhu. Okay. Exactly. Well, here, since you want it sounds like you guys want it to be a rhetorical question, so I'll give you some answers. But before I do that, seriously, think about it. Why? Actually, it's nice to have Badrinaran Maharaj here. One of his quotes that I like to quote that he often uses, I hope I get this right, is that we both read the Bible day and night. What's, yes. So why is that? Can you think about why do you have a different opinion than the devotees sitting next to you? Preconceived notions and mental filters. Where do the preconceived notions come from? Okay. So the value system that we're brought up with. Yes, Mataji? Experiences we've gone through in our life, yes. Value system, experiences. How about, yes, Marsh? Hmm. Different stages in our life, yes. Yes, Boo? The modes of nature that they've acquired, yes. Okay, those are great. I would add perhaps purva samskars. Samskars are impressions in the mind from previous births, right? Those that certainly have a effect. And as devotees, our early training, you know, early training, you know, poorly, well, no, my early training was by you, so it's all paka. So, but our early training in Krishna consciousness, we may have joined a temple that emphasizes this or emphasizes that. That could be have our education, our level of education, our association. Right? I don't know that. Does anyone here speak Portuguese? Yes? Oh, I thought a hand up. Okay. I think it's similar in Spanish, but there's a saying in Portuguese that tell me who you associate with and I'll tell you who you are. You know, and we also know that great Mahabhagavat Hiranyakashipu said that we are like, crystal, right? If you put a crystal on a black surface, it'll look black. If you put it on a white surface, it'll look white. We adapt very much to the association that we have in it. We are we can be at least chameleon-ish in that sense. Okay, our place of birth. Yeah. Right? And, like I'm from New York, and there's that famous New Yorker cover, New Yorker magazine cover, where they have all these details of Manhattan and all the roads and everything, and then there's the Hudson River, and then there's New Jersey, California, Japan. In other words, we even the Shastra says, right, Boma ijadi, that a person considers the place of birth as worshipable. I was once giving a class, and my son is a bit of a wise guy, and so I was giving this class and saying somebody who thinks that their place of birth is worshipable is in Maya, and he raises his hand and he says, well, my place of birth is worshipable. He was born in Vrindavan, so, wise guy. I kicked him out of the class. Yeah, he gets from his mother, yeah, right. So we have these different opinions, and Srila Prabhupada wrote about it. He says the following. Disunity between individual souls is so strong within this material world that even of Krishna consciousness, members sometimes appear disunited due to having different opinions. And then he adds, and leaning towards material things. Actually, in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be two opinions. There is only one goal, to serve Krishna to one's best ability. If there is some agreement over service, such disagreement is to be taken as spiritual. Those who are actually engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be disunited in any circumstance. Okay? So that's, so Prabhupada is acknowledging, Srila Prabhupada is acknowledging here that there can be different opinions, although he's also adding that in the more absolute sense, that, we're all serving Krishna. Now, sometimes we'll find that, just like we found with Prabhupada's use of the word conservative and liberal, sometimes he used the word conservative in a very positive light, sometimes he used it in a negative light, and the same with the word liberal, right? There's, anyone here heard of Ralph Waldo Emerson? Okay, a number of you have. So he said one of his famous sayings is, a foolish consistency is a hobgoblin of little minds. Now, of course, we know Srila Prabhupada was not one iota inconsistent in his presentation of Siddhanta, right? That's clear. And we know that at different times he would say different things. And to not do that, Emerson would say is a person of little mind. So we talked about, he would adjust according to time, place, and circumstance. And I'll read to you the first one that I ever came upon as a new devotee. And this probably spun my head around for about a week, trying to understand it, because I was just reading and maybe some of you read this and had a similar reaction to what I had at first. The very, very first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in verses 28 and 29. Okay, so in 28, Prabhupada says, although it is not mentioned here, still one can easily imagine that not only were Arjuna's bodily limbs quivering and his mouth drying up, but he was also crying out of compassion. Such symptoms in Arjuna were not due to weakness, but to his soft-heartedness, a characteristic of a pure devotee of the Lord. Next verse, very next verse. Arjuna's symptoms in this situation are out of material fear, namely loss of life. This is evident from other symptoms also. He became so impatient that his famous bow Gandiva was slipping from his hands, and because his heart was burning within him, he was feeling a burning sensation of the skin. All these are due to a material conception of life. So for me, when I went, what's going on? There actually is no contradiction in this. And if you go back and you look at the previous Acharya's comments, same exact point. He's making two different points. He's making one point on one purport, another point on another. Yet for the untrained eye, it would seem, to be And another story I heard from Hari Sari Prabhu, that because Hari Sari Prabhu was in the room with Srila Prabhupada, and one sannyasi came, paid obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. I don't remember the order, but he told one sannyasi, you're a sannyasi, you should not stay any place more than a few days. You should be constantly traveling and preaching. That sannyasi paid obeisances and left the room. A few minutes later, another sannyasi came, paid obeisances, and Srila Prabhupada said, you are a sannyasi, you should stay here in this one place and develop it and preach. Don't, travel anywhere. So is that a contradiction? Yes, Maharaj?
Driving everybody nuts. Robert dealt with it by telling him, Akshayananda, who was a very good manager and a nice devotee who was fond of him, was so gentle, he thought, fine, I'll just take some house and travel. I'm already some house, I'll just travel for you. So Prabhupada said, why is it whimsical? Forget it, stay here.
Very good. Yeah, no, thank you. And the backstory is helpful, just to show that Srila Prabhupada was not being whimsical, but he was a perfect application of time, place, and circumstance. Yes. Yet, not yet. And so we do find that Srila Prabhupada would say different things at different times. And sometimes we have, probably many of you are familiar with the devotee in our movement, Rabindra Swarup Prabhu. So he would sometimes say that we engage in Srila Prabhupada quote snowball fights. We take one quote and we say, what do you think about that? And the other one goes onto their computer and finds a quote that supports their point of view. No, Prabhupada said this. And in this way we have a volley of things. So that's one reason but that is one reason that we will find sometimes that devotees will have different opinions, let's say conservative and liberal or whatever, because at times Srila Prabhupada would say something in this direction and sometimes in that direction. This is not a thorough analysis, but from my study, I would find that he would tend to be more laying down the law when he was sitting on a Vyasasana and speaking, from Shastra, and he would apply that law much more individually when talking to individual devotees. Maharaj, would you agree with that? Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. No. I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that. I was only saying that my experience is, and this is general, it's not 100% of the time, that when Srila Prabhupada was giving the class on the Vyasa-san, he was really laying down the absolute truth and the law. And when he was speaking sometimes to individual devotees, he would be more in terms of applying it to their specific situation. Yeah. So then you brought up the modes of material nature, Prabhu. Yes. So that's another thing, that although Srila Prabhupada said it was natural that we would have different opinions sometimes, the tricky thing is that when we kind of dig in our heels, and it's just like, it's this way. Now, that may be done with total sincerity. It could be, and I emphasize on could, that it may be some influence of the mode of passion. Here's 2 verses from the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Yes, exactly. Yes, absolutely. Yes. That knowledge, and I'm going to develop this a little bit, so bear with me. That knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understood to be in the mode of. Hello? Anyone hear what I said? you have 3 choices. Jai Sisi Gaurnitai, Jai Sisi Kishore Kishori, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai. I'll read it again. Now this time listen. That knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, should be understood to be in the mode of. Very good. That knowledge by which one sees that in every different body there is a different type of living entity, you should understand to be in the mode of. Very good. Okay. So. No, there's the next one. So if we, well, I'm going to continue without even commenting on those. So what about avoiding the mode of passion? Okay. Now, one quote that I like to consider a lot is from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I believe it's the 13th chapter, text number 4. And there we hear about 10 different things that influence how we are influenced by the modes. Okay? So you ready for those 10? The quality of what we read, what we drink, our association, the particular place that we're in. Right? Don't we have that experience? Different places have different modes. The time of the day. Mm-hmm. The activity that we perform. Our birth. What or whom we meditate on. What mantras we chant. You know, do we chant the latest pop song or do we chant the Hare Krishna mantra, right? The different rituals that we perform, and the different rituals that we perform. These all affect the modes of material nature that we're affected, that we're influenced by. Okay. And then here's another thing I want to read to you, which is from the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text 32. And this is also ties in with the modes. First of all, Krishna says, among logicians, oh, no, this is Srila Prabhupada's purport, sorry. Among logicians, there are different types of arguments. Supporting one's arguments with evidence that also supports the opposite side is called jalpa. Merely trying to defeat one's opponent. Anyone ever done that? The only fun thing is defeating the other person. You might even forgot what the argument was about. Is called vitanda. But the actual conclusion is called vada. Okay. This conclusive truth is a representative of Krishna. Now I'm going to read a short, it's just very short, but this is, I'm not sure it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur or Baladev Vidyabhushan, but their commentary on this. Nyaya, logic, teaches various ways to reach a conclusion, including vitanda, vada, and jalpa. Krishna says, I am vada, the natural conclusion. Vada is debate carried out fairly according to standard rules without trying to force the establishment of a particular conclusion. So in modern argument, it's called a creative argument. Not that you're being creative, but you're open-minded. You have your opinion, you express that, and you're also open to hear other ideas, because what your concern is pursuing the truth and not just pursuing being right. Okay? Vitanda is quibbling or merely destructive argument in which one tries to defeat the opponent by any means possible, but does nothing substantial to positively prove one's own thesis. And jalpa, using various deceptive means to fool the opposition, is an unfair argument. Vitanda and jalpa are forms of argument in which winning, not necessarily determining the truth, is the main conclusion. As a little aside, I guess I could tell you a story where I took a course on logic by His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami, and me being of a crooked nature, not very honest person, I was trying to figure out how to use these in deceptive ways. So I actually found a deceptive way. I'll tell you this since it's so many years ago now. It was 1987. So I had just gone to India to take this class, and it was the first semester of the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education. And I wanted to go back. I really was attracted to the whole training, and specifically it was the first time I had met His Grace Burijan Prabhu, and I really wanted to help him out and serve there. So I was in the Detroit temple, and I knew that if I said, I want to go back in January, I'd just been in October, I want to go back to India in January, they were going to say, forget it. You were just there. What about all the other devotees? And, and how can we afford it, and et cetera, et cetera. So we had learned this one logical fallacy, which is the means between the extremes. And I don't think I really have to explain what it is. I'll just give you the example. So what I did was I went to the board and I said, Prabhus, I really want to go to India for 6 months. I only wanted to go for 1 month, but I said 6 months. And they were saying, forget it, no, how can you, they were, universe. So I said, okay, I'll just go for a month. They said, oh, fine. And I went to India, yes.
As former temple president, it'll make you appreciate how nice it is. If I needed someone to do 4:15 cooking, that maybe took an hour, I would ask them, can you do the 6:35, which was, more offerings than 2 hours. So my next question, okay, just do the 4:15. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And Srila Prabhupada did that with Dainipan when he was negotiating. The Dainipan said $1.45 per book, and Tamal Krishnamurti said, I think, $1.25. Yes, it was all set up right, and they were going, so no, Swamiji, no, and maybe he said, I can't remember. Go ahead.
They scanned it before. They probably told them what to do. And so they made their presentation. And Krishna Maharaj made it this super, like you say, low advice. And they just breathed. And they were arguing, Krishna Maharaj stop the sun. So all was arguing, and they were a total log jam, passed. And then the prophet stepped in as the mediator to help sort the thing out. And he said to them, well, you're asking me that. And they negotiated, probably going to negotiate, and right where he wanted, much lower than that.
Right. And then they said, Swamiji, thank you very much. We're happy. Yes. Right. Right. But besides that point, and me using tricky life, but the idea is that Vada is a search for the truth, and these other two are less than that. And so our approach should be, even when we have different viewpoints, and it's not always easy to do this, but to be less detached, to be more sattvic. The passion is really, you're holding on to your belief, and the scissors and the knife thing, right? And the person's drowning, and that story? Yeah, Maharaj, you want to tell that story?
Two men traveling together. Somehow or other they come to, they're camping for the night, or whatever, they're by the banks of the river.
They're by the banks of the river. And so they've got to cut a rope and tie it around a bucket and drop it in for the water. So the man says, oh, I got a good knife right here. Shen said, no, you got to use scissors. If you use a knife, it'll fray the ends. He said, no, you got to use it. And they get in a big argument, knife, scissors. And finally, the knife advocate, it's a bigger guy, becomes so upset and says, if you don't agree with me, I'm going to put you in this river. I'm going to drown. And the guy says, no, scissors is better. So the knife advocate grabs the skinny little scissors guys and holding him under the water. So the guy is drowning. The scissors advocate is underwater drowning. He puts one hand up and he goes like this.
Right. So we want to avoid that kind of, that's an influence of the mode of passion. And rather, again, remember, we're talking about within the confines of Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra. We want to present what we think is right, but also be open to hear. Right? So that is, so how to deal with these situations, that's that first point, is to be a good listener. And here's a great letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to Balavanta Prabhu, who is setting up preaching programs in universities. And he says, now I want that we shall recruit more and more our men amongst the intelligent class. They, because they are a little educated, or they have some wealth or fame or ability, they will sometimes be a little puffed up, but that's all right, they deserve it. Now we shall have to learn the art how to approach such higher class men and attract them to apply themselves to this Krishna conscious process of self-realization. That requires much tact, and we shall have to expect to meet all challenges by sharp minds. But if we remain always absorbed in remembering Lord Chaitanya, how he converted so many intelligent men, even sitting for 7 days and nights to hear them speak without himself speaking anything. Who did he do that with? Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And if we remember how Krishna was so much patient to explain everything to Arjuna, even Arjuna was speaking like a fool. In this way, being always tolerant of others and appreciating their points of view, it will be easy matter for us to convince them gradually to join us. Now remember, he was talking about college students, 1972. Their point of view that we're supposed to appreciate was probably generally sex, drugs, rock and roll, and Mayavad philosophy. But the idea is that when you listen, because often when somebody's speaking something to us, especially if they're kind of saying something that's off, what's going on in our mind? What we're going to say next is usually what goes on our mind. So the problem with that, besides it doesn't help much with relationships, is that we don't catch some of the really important things. Well, you said this, but let me explain it in a different way. You can't do that if you're always thinking what you're going to say and you're not listening to what they have to say. So Krishna says in the Gita, Sattva Sanjayate Jnanam. Right, that's 14th chapter or 17th chapter, can't remember. From the mode of goodness, knowledge comes. So one way to express the mode of goodness amongst many is to be a very good listener, is to really listen carefully. So we speak our opinions, whether they're conservative or liberal, and another person may have a very different view than us, but we listen to them very carefully. And then we weigh with our intelligence and our understanding of Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra. Do we accept this? Do we not accept this? Is there some place in the middle or whatever? But being thoughtful, right? Prabhupada said a devotee is thoughtful as much as a non-devotee is speculative, right? So we think deeply about these things. And in that way, whenever practical, we're in a creative mindset. There's two different kinds of arguments, creative and fixed. Right? Now, if we're talking to somebody who's saying, there is no God, or, whatever, or, who is this Krishna anyway? We're not going to say, well, maybe you're right. Maybe Krishna's not so important. Let's compromise, right? We say Krishna is God. You say there is no God. Let's compromise. Let's just say that maybe he's a demigod or a really smart person. We don't do stuff like that because there's some fixed things. Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. Right, so that's a fixed argument, and certainly we have those sometimes, right? When we're out, but when we're talking about within the confines of Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra, within Vaishnava Sangha, then we have the luxury of being more creative and being able to weigh both sides, or maybe 5 different sides, and considering what's the best. Any comments on anything we've said so far? Yes, Prabhu? Wait, why don't you get the microphone so we can hear you, Prabhu?
Chanaka Pandit said there's a word to the wise is sufficient, but there's no end to the words needed to convince a fool.
Right. Right. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, right? Yes. And what we tried to do here, by the way, I'd like to talk a little bit more now specifically about liberal and conservative. This was a topic given to me. It wasn't my choice, by the way. There's some interdependency going on here. As Prabhupada writes in, I think it's the 3rd chapter, therefore both yogas are interdependent as religion and philosophy. Religion without philosophy is sentiment and sometimes fanaticism, while philosophy without religion is mental speculation. So it's not exactly liberal and conservative, but these two there is some interdependency. And the other point that I wanted to make, if I can remember the point, is that the fact that we have these kind of discussions, or even we could say arguments sometimes in ISKCON, is not a bad sign. It is a good sign. If people couldn't care less, that means like the organization's just dead. It's just become totally mediocre, right? But the fact that there's life is that we will have these kind of things. So it's not, the mark of a great organization is not that there aren't different opinions. The mark of a great organization is how they deal with them, right? Just like we have a discussion that's going to take place in our GBC meetings in Tirupati this year. And it's a topic, I won't get into the details, it's a topic that's been discussed for many years. But what has been done in preparation for that is a devotee, maybe some of you know Gauranga Prabhu in Chopati. He's collecting all of the different quotes from Srila Prabhupada, from previous acharyas on this topic so that we can have a really informed discussion on the topic, not just, my opinion's like this or my opinion's like that, but base it on solid research and solid understanding. But the fact that we have these things, some of us may be by nature what we call conflict averse, and which is funny, I'm a little like that, even though my whole life is based on dealing with conflicts, both. Yeah, no one. Oh, yes. Actually, when people ask me, so you have a job because I work for the federal government, resolving conflicts, they said, does that keep you employed? I said, when devotees ask me that, I say, Prabhu, it's Kali Yuga, it's a growth industry. So, yeah, there's no loss. Now Prabhu, could you erase this? Let's talk a little bit about identity. Because in order to have these kind of creative arguments, right, where we're willing to listen to all sides and really make an informed, try to make an informed conclusion, and also hopefully as a group make an informed conclusion, we want to propose 2 different possibilities. You ready for this? So. Okay, so these are 2 different organizations, okay? And in one organization, people pretty much, you could say, vote or believe in things according to a party line. You see that? Devotee A, or person A, B, C, and D, they always kind of have the same opinions and with the same group of people, and devotees E, F, G, and H. Now, this group has a different thing. Sometimes A, B, E, and F agree. Sometimes these guys agree. Sometimes these guys agree. Sometimes these guys agree. Sometimes these guys agree. You see, it's much more, they're willing to listen and not necessarily just have like a party line on it, but think individually, use their intelligence, as Srila Prabhupada said, independently thoughtful individuals, what he was looking for in devotees. And sometimes they'll agree with this. They don't necessarily just think, oh, these are my buddies, or these are people who think conservatively, or these are people who think liberally, but they'll look at each individual situation and make their best judgment. And generally speaking, this is a healthier organization. Any comments? Questions? Yes, Prabhu. Do you want a microphone? Hold on.
I've noticed that when we are trained by a certain spiritual master or a very senior devotee of a disciple of a certain spiritual master, we tend to have the same kinds of mindset, the same kinds of approach to solving problems.
Yes.
And I've been told that that's a nice thing because that means we are individually thinking, but at the same time have the same mood of the spiritual master carrying that. So to me, it seems like that's what I've seen mostly, not so much this.
Interesting. I don't know if I need to comment on that, but
like actually that scares me a little bit because that means there's a lot of independent thinking and nobody's really agreeing with anybody. There's no principle, as you were talking about, details versus principle.
This is my 2 cents, and if Badrinaran Maharaj wants to add or subtract, I'd be happy to hear more than happy to hear what he has to say. My take on that is that within limits, it's fine. If one spiritual master is like really attracted to Harinam Sankirtan, and that's his mission in life, and maybe Prabhupada told him to do that, then I think a good disciple would feel as I'd like to contribute to my spiritual master's service to his spiritual master. It can get extreme, and we have silos within ISKCON, and then that might be unhealthy. But Maharaj, looks like you'd like to comment. Pardon me? Yeah, that would be, and we actually just spoke about that at some of our meetings today, that it's important for our leaders to work together so that the disciples see, yes, well, my Guru Maharaj cooperates with, his god brother, and they talk about things, and I know also a lot of spiritual masters who say to their disciples, no, think for yourself, and if you're more attracted to something other than the service, that's okay. But we're individuals, and we have our individual likings, and we have our individual relationships. But if it gets to the extent where we're not being cooperative, I once did some research. I really got into Folio. The Folio is the computer program of all of Srila Prabhupada's quotes. And I just looked up one word, cooperation. And I got all, the hits. And then I took out anything that was not about management. Like if Prabhupada said we should cooperate with the will of the Lord. Took that out. So just the quotes on management. Okay? And and then I only quoted 1 or 2 sentences instead of the whole letter or the whole discussion. And I came up with 18 pages. So one of Prabhupada's, I would say, my research would say, is one of his main ways that he managed this movement was emphasizing cooperation. So if things get extreme to the extent that there's not cooperation, then that would probably be pratikul or unfavorable. But within limits, I think it would be fine. Yes, Prabhu. Wait for the microphone, though, so we can hear your transcendental voice. Oops. Now it works.
Didn't he once say cooperate and organize freely?
Cooperate and?
Organize freely.
Freely?
Organize freely amongst yourselves. It kind of says the same word,
Yeah, perhaps. I'm not sure.
And then your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate with one another.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
We can cooperate. What I say.
That's right. One other important point to mention, by the way, and that is that this is a general rule, but I just said one other point. I haven't made the point yet. I know it's hard with the echo sometimes. And there's a lot of empirical research about this, but my experience is that it also applies to our society. That often, we don't have the liberal and conservative, but often on the extremes, people are the most vocal. Right? You have people who can write, 50 emails a day and things like that, and then in the middle are the more moderate people, generally speaking. The rule of thumb is that 10% to 20% on each extreme. And what leadership and management has to be careful of is because they kind of, as Prabhupada said, the duck that quacks the loudest, right? They talk a lot and they're very loud, whereas the moderate people are less loud. Sometimes a lot of energy goes to the extremes and we neglect the 60 to 80% that are in the middle and are more moderate. So that is a warning, but it's something we just have to be conscious of, that we don't forget, which is often the majority who aren't on those extremes. That's just a point. And finally, we go back to Mataji's point about what's the difference between a principle and a detail. And that is, whether we're, conservative, liberal, in one sense, we got to be careful not to make these designations. We are all devotees, we're all chanting Hare Krishna, and we have to keep what in conflict resolution they call it the superordinate goal, the big goal in mind, that we're here to serve Srila Prabhupada, we're here to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. We may have especially we have different opinions about how to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Hopefully we don't have too many different opinions about how to be Krishna conscious, but a lot of it is about preaching and what's appropriate and what's not. But to keep in mind that, we're dealing with devotees, we definitely want to avoid Vaishnava aparad, yet that doesn't mean we don't express our concerns and our opinions strongly, but we express them in a Vaishnava way. And as we've seen, because so many of our, as we're getting older, our devotees are passing away. So we don't want to wait until they pass away to say good things about them. Which sometimes happens, right? We're on that person's case like anything, and they pass away. He was such a great soul, like that. So just keeping in mind that we are in this all together, and if that person, because there is a tendency that in conflict resolution we talk about how the closer you are to a person, the more intense the conflicts can be, right? Like, for example, let's say even in Vaishnavism, if we have a different opinion about somebody in a different sampradaya, Ram, right? But if someone is, a Gaudiya Vaishnava who may not be, part of our organization or something, but it's then it can be really intense sometimes. Or what to speak of husband and wife or children and parents and things like that. The closer, the opportunity at least for more intensity. And so although we're so close to each other, as one devotee once put it, devotee sangha, you can't live with them, you can't live without them. but we should learn to live in the society of devotees, whether it's conservative or liberal, whether it's pizza or pakoras. We should, honor each other. And again, of course, to remember, we're talking within the confines of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. If we're outside those confines, it is a different story. We still are compassionate, but we have a much stronger responsibility to correct and stay on the right path. Some comments? You have a microphone?
I had a question.
Okay.
You mentioned that with closeness there is more conflict. Is it because of attachment, or is it because you know the subject matter more, so you know to disagree more than if you were too far away, you wouldn't know what to talk about?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's also just it's just like, let's say Sri Sampradaya, we maybe, I don't know, I have no idea, maybe 60% or is this same, or 80%, right? But if it's somebody who's like 99.5, we'll concentrate on that 0.5, right? And maybe for a very good reason, by the way, right? And we all know from, familial relationships and things like that, things can be most intense. Also, familiarity can breed contempt, right? So we have to actually be careful in the association of devotees to not let things like differences of opinion override things like Vaishnava etiquette. Is that all right? Yes, Prabhu? In the back there, this gentleman first. Then you can go next, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. I want to be a little conservative to what I'm going to say. The norm, the doctrine should have been negotiated. Probably the formal aspect in the application of the norms. But one of the things that identify us as ISKCON or whatever other church or creed or whatever is that the norms should stay absolutely straight, strong.
Yes.
But there's a fine line in the application sometimes.
Exactly. No, you got it right. And I hope that was the purport of this talk. We're not going to change 4 regulative principles. We're not going to change 16 rounds. We're not going to change that, there's 5 most potent items of bhakti: chanting the holy name, reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, worshiping the deity, living in a holy place, associating with devotees. We might tell a person who has a job that starts at 5 in the morning that he can chant, 4 rounds when he wakes up, 4 rounds later, 4 rounds,
Exactly.
Things like that kind of change, Or we might allow devotees, whatever, pizza is okay sometimes, maybe not for the deed, you know what I mean? As opposed, but taking prasadam is the principle. What kind of prasadam we take is the detail.
Or associating with the right guys,
or the
associating with the company of the right people.
Mm-hmm.
But
So thank you for that. Yes, Prabhu. I'll wait for the mic.
Hare Krishna. But how do we adapt to the changes of cooperation? Because once we start cooperating, doesn't mean that we go necessarily with the flow, because otherwise we start segregating, wouldn't it?
Maybe it's my age, or maybe it's the echo, but I couldn't hear. I heard up to about cooperation. And what was the second part? Talk slowly and keep the microphone a little away from you.
Okay. How do we adapt to the cooperation part? Because it seems that as we are cooperating, we might start going with the flow or just one point of view. In that sense, we have the tendency to segregate, and then we fall again to the certain groups that follow our mindset.
Well, we use the term cooperation in different places and different meanings, right? On a general level, right? For example, in let's say, do you live in the temple?
No, at the present moment.
Okay, so someone who lives in a temple, cooperation generally means that one will, take guidance and instruction on even everything from philosophical points to even practically how they spend their day from, some temple authority, whether it's a temple president or a head of a department. And in general, there's a very good thing, especially when we're younger, to have this kind of I say you do attitude. Of course, not crazy things like, you should jump off the second floor, but it's healthy actually. Discipline, it's a very good thing. And even in some places in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada even talks about how he talks about it like a military discipline. So that's not a bad thing, and that's not cult behavior. And obviously, if somebody tells you to do something strange, but to have a bit of that mood, especially for our young men living in the ashram and things, is a very healthy thing. And now, as we get older and as we accept more responsibility, it's quite likely that there's going to be a lot more give and take, and that's also cooperation. Depending on our as Maharaj had mentioned, we have different stages in our life. We have different mindsets. There was a famous book in the 70s called Passages, and it kind of talked about what a person's like in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. It was very American-centric, but it was an interesting to think like that. So in different stages in our life, cooperation may take on a different details, but the idea ultimately is that we're meant to cooperate with the will of the Lord, and how that applies in our life is often through cooperating with other devotees. Is that all right? Yeah. Mars, did you want to add anything to that? No? What else? Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was very nice getting this opportunity to talk to you all. Hare Krishna. Glories to Srila Prabhupada.